The breeze off Lake Ladora smelled like pine needles, wet rocks, and freedom. Derrick Lawson stood barefoot on the edge of his new dock, casting a slow, deliberate line into the glimmering water. His shoulders finally relaxed after years of always being up, tense, ready. Here, in this tucked-away corner of Colorado, time felt slower. The lake stretched wide before him, untouched at this hour except for the soft quack of a distant mallard. No sirens, no shouting, no paperwork, just peace. This was what he'd worked for. 20 years in federal service, 10 of those on high-profile fugitive cases, 3 bullet scars, and 1 failed marriage later. Derrick had finally cashed in his peace. He bought the lakefront property outright, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, private dock, and enough space from the nearest neighbor that he could breathe without hearing anyone else's problems. Except for the ducks and the sun, he was alone. And that's exactly how he wanted it. The neighborhood, Silver Pines at Lake Ladora, was technically across the water, a gated community built for retirees who wanted serenity with style, according to the brochure. Derrick hadn't bought in their development. He didn't need their tennis courts or forced social events. He found a piece of land just outside their jurisdiction but sharing the same shoreline. Lake access, but without the politics. At least, that's what the real estate agent had promised. Derrick reeled in the line and reset. The rod flicked forward, smooth and practiced, the lure kissing the lake with a soft plunk. He smiled. Finally, no noise. That's when he heard the electric hum of tires on gravel. A white golf cart rolled slowly along the road that curved just above his house. It paused, right in line with his property, and lingered. From behind oversized sunglasses, a woman peered down. Blonde bob, taut smile, clipboard. She didn't wave, just stared. Derrick gave a polite nod. Nothing. The cart crept forward another 10 feet and stopped again. Weird. He turned back to his rod, pretending not to notice the way she picked up a walkie-talkie. Just nosy neighbors, he thought. Harmless. But it happened again the next morning. And the next. Always the same golf cart. Same woman. Clipboard, glasses, and the same silence. One day, she even leaned over the side and took a photo. Derrick heard the shutter click before he could look up. He started to take mental notes the way he used to in field ops. Same route, same time. 7:04 a.m. Right as the sun hit the east bank. Always alone. Never friendly. By the 5th day, he was no longer brushing it off. Inside his home, a blend of rustic pine and clean lines, Derrick tried to shake the feeling. He checked his deed again. It was clear. Lake access rights included. No HOA affiliation. Still, something itched under his skin. He knew when people were watching him for the wrong reasons. The first time he'd been followed, he was 11, walking home from school in a Denver suburb. An old man in a pickup trailed him slowly, just a little too close. His mother told him not to be paranoid, but the next day, the same truck was there again. When he ran, it turned away. Some things you didn't forget. Back at the lake, the woman in the golf cart, whoever she was, hadn't said a word yet. But her message was already loud. You don't belong here. Silver Pines was nearly all white. He'd noticed that on the drive through, even if his agent had avoided the subject. The kind of place where diversity was a talking point at committee meetings, not a visible reality. Every lawn was trimmed like a country club. Every mailbox painted the same beige. But on his side of the lake, still county land, not HOA managed, it was quieter, wilder, and just a little more real. Derrick wasn't looking to cause problems. He just wanted to fish, maybe build a little boathouse, live under the radar. But old instincts were hard to ignore. People watching. Pictures taken. Something told him this woman wasn't going to stay a distant observer forever. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines and the lake turned the color of poured copper, Derrick stood on the porch with a cold beer in hand. From across the water, the lights in the Silver Pines clubhouse flickered on, soft amber glows in perfectly symmetrical windows. From this angle, his property looked identical to theirs. Same lake, same view. But Derrick knew the difference. It wasn't about water or land. It was about control. Lines drawn not in ink, but in attitude. He sipped his beer slowly, gaze steady. He'd faced cartels, militias, bounty hunters, and bank robbers. If a retired suburban woman with a clipboard thought she could intimidate him out of his legal property, she was in for a surprise. She just didn't know who she was watching. Not yet. It didn't take long for her to make contact. The next Saturday morning, Derrick was sanding a piece of cedar for a dock bench when he heard the unmistakable crunch of slow tires on gravel. He didn't look up immediately. The sound stopped near the end of his driveway, then came the click of golf cart brakes and the practiced shuffle of someone used to being obeyed. "Excuse me," the voice called out. Sharp, clipped, like a school principal catching a kid with gum in his mouth. Derrick turned, still holding the sander. The woman from the golf cart was now at the edge of his property line, clutching her clipboard like a badge. "Morning," he said, polite but firm. She stepped forward. "I'm Linda Hargrove, president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association." He gave a short nod. "Derrick Lawson. I figured that out. Saw the moving truck last week." She glanced pointedly at his toolboxes, then to the dock. "Your building?" "Just a bench," he said. "I like to fish in comfort." She didn't smile. "I hope you're aware that the Silver Pines HOA has very strict guidelines regarding structures near the water, especially those that might impact the lake's appearance or our shoreline standards." Derrick cocked an eyebrow. "I'm not in the HOA." A pause. Just half a second, but enough to notice. "Well," she said, as if correcting a child, "technically, your property touches lakefront that is considered community-maintained. And all lake users must be registered with the HOA. It's in the regional covenants." "Not in mine," Derrick replied, already stepping toward his porch. "County deed is clear. I own this parcel, including dock access. Fully outside HOA jurisdiction." Linda's eyes flicked. "Sometimes these things get misunderstood in the closing process. We've had people before who thought they weren't under HOA management, but it turned out." "No misunderstanding," Derrick said. "I had my attorney run a full title search. You don't manage this land." Her face flattened. "Well, even if you're not technically in the HOA, there's a spirit to the community. We work hard to maintain a certain standard." "I'm not disrespecting the community, Ms. Hargrove. Just living on my land." She didn't move. "We do like to have new residents check in, meet the board, receive the guidelines. Even if you're not inside the gate, your activity reflects on us." Derrick smiled thinly. "You want me to register with a club I'm not part of, follow rules I don't agree to, and submit plans for a bench on my private dock?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "We just like to know who our neighbors are." Derrick didn't miss the meaning behind that sentence. Before he could respond, she took a photo of his license plate, then turned briskly and walked back to her golf cart. The first letter came on Monday. Typed in stiff legalese with the Silver Pines logo at the top, it warned that his unauthorized structure may be in violation of lakefront guidelines and that the HOA reserved the right to take further action if compliance is not met. No signature. No legal justification. Just threats. Derrick scanned it, chuckled, and dropped it into the recycling bin. The second letter was hand-delivered on Thursday, folded and taped to his mailbox post. Same tone, but with an added paragraph about trespassing on private water. He was being tested. This was the part where people usually folded. Apologized. Backed off. Maybe even put their house up for sale. He'd seen it before. In towns across the country, the invisible lines of privilege and power policed not by law, but by intimidation. But Derrick wasn't some out-of-towner who didn't know better. He'd grown up just an hour from here. He knew how these folks operated. Linda Hargrove wasn't protecting lake purity or community values. She was enforcing a social border, and Derrick had crossed it. One morning he caught her again, this time standing on the edge of her own dock across the lake, binoculars in hand. He waved. She didn't wave back. It escalated in petty steps. One day, his trash can was knocked over, contents scattered across his gravel drive. Another day, someone left a pamphlet for a lakefront beautification committee tucked under his door, with the words, "We're all stewards of this space," underlined in red. At the local post office, a white man in a golf shirt tapped Derrick on the shoulder and asked, "Are you the new guy on West Shore? Heard there's some issues about lake rights. You renting or buying?" "Bought," Derrick said flatly.
Oh.
Huh. The man paused. "Well, just so you know, most of us around here pitch in. We like to keep things a certain way." Derrick stared at him until the man muttered something and walked off. He started documenting everything. Phone photos,
Notes.
video from his Ring camera. Not because he feared them, but because he'd learned long ago that when power tried to act innocent, receipts were everything. Derrick kept his cool. He always did. But inside, something churned. It wasn't just about the dock or the rules.
It was about ownership.
Linda and her circle couldn't stand that someone like him, black, self-assured, and unbothered, could own lakefront property without asking permission. They didn't just see a neighbor. They saw a breach. By the end of the second week, the letters stopped, but the whispers didn't. Derrick noticed kids from the HOA side weren't playing near his dock anymore. A woman walking her golden retriever crossed the street when she saw him. He didn't care, but he noticed. Then came the knock on the door. Saturday morning, fresh coffee in hand. A heavy bang on wood, knuckles, not politeness. Derrick opened the door. 2 police officers stood on his porch. The taller of the 2 officers adjusted his belt as Derrick opened the door. The younger one, hand resting near his sidearm, gave a nod that was polite but cautious. "Morning, sir," the tall one said. "We received a call about suspicious activity on this property. Mind if we speak with you a moment?" Derrick didn't flinch. "Suspicious, huh?" He stepped outside slowly, closing the door behind him.
Sure.
"Let's talk." Both officers relaxed a little as they got a clearer look at him. He wore gray sweatpants, a hoodie with USMS embroidered across the chest, and held a ceramic coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Fisherman." "I'm Officer Campton. This is Officer Velez," the tall one said. "We got a report of a man loitering near children on the lake. Said you were on the dock, possibly intoxicated." Derrick tilted his head. "Is that right?" "Neighbor across the lake made the report," Velez added, not meeting his eyes. Derrick didn't need a name. He could see Linda's white golf cart parked near her porch on the opposite shore, pointed directly at his dock like a missile. She was watching, no doubt. "I'm assuming she didn't mention that this is my dock," Derrick said. Campton frowned. "She said the dock wasn't part of your property. Claimed it was community-owned." Derrick gave a patient smile, sipped his coffee, then turned and walked inside without a word. The officers glanced at each other, unsure. A moment later, he returned with a folder. "County GIS map," Derrick said, handing over a printed sheet. "Parcel 4973B. My name. Legal lakefront rights. Dock built in compliance with code. No HOA jurisdiction." Campton took the document, studied it.
Huh.
"You're right. I usually am," Derrick said, calm and measured. "And, before we go any further, maybe this'll clear things up." He reached into the front pouch of his hoodie and pulled out a worn leather case. Flipped it open. The gold badge of a United States Marshal glinted in the morning light. Officer Velez straightened.
Oh.
"Damn. Sir." Campton coughed. "Marshal Lawson. Sorry, we didn't realize." "Didn't expect you to," Derrick said. "And it's fine. You're just responding to a call. I've been on your side of the door enough times to know the drill." The tension dissolved fast. Velez looked genuinely embarrassed. "You're not under any investigation, Marshal. We'll make sure that's clear in the report." Campton handed back the paperwork. "This woman, Linda Hargrove, has made multiple calls to the department over the years. Noise complaints, lawn violations, even try to have a guy cited for planting the wrong color tulips. Sounds like a real pillar of the community," Derrick muttered. Campton lowered his voice. "Off the record? She's a problem. Has pull with a couple of council members, but we've dealt with her before. We'll mark the call as unfounded." Derrick nodded. "Appreciate it." The officers turned to leave, then paused. Velez asked, "If you don't mind me asking, what division?" "Fugitive Task Force," Derrick replied. "Out of Denver. Spent 10 years in high-risk warrant service. Velez let out a low whistle. Respect. As they walked back to their cruiser, Derrick watched Linda from across the lake. She was no longer sitting. The golf cart had vanished. Curtains pulled shut. He smiled. The next morning he went fishing. No interruptions. No binoculars. No HOA letters duct taped to the dock. Linda stayed silent, and so did her clipboard. The lake was still, except for the occasional ripples from a cast line and the distant sound of sprinklers kicking on across the water. For the first time in days, Derrick felt like the land truly belonged to him, not just on paper but in practice. But even then, he knew it wasn't over. Not really. Linda Hargrove wouldn't back down just because the cops couldn't touch him. People like her rarely retreated, they regrouped. She wouldn't call the police again, not now. That move had backfired spectacularly. But she'd find another angle. A complaint to the county. A petition to rezone the lake access. A community improvement campaign that just happened to make his life harder. He'd seen it before. Suppression in a sundress. A week passed in uneasy calm. Then one afternoon, Derrick returned from a grocery run to find a man pacing at the edge of his property, a short, balding guy in a beige polo, holding a laminated folder. "Can I help you?" Derrick asked, stepping out of his truck. The man flinched slightly.
Oh, hey.
"Yeah. Name's Phil Chandler. I'm on the Silver Pines Architectural Review Committee. Just wanted to talk to you about the bench on your dock." "It's a bench," Derrick said flatly. "On my dock. On my land." Right. I get that. It's just the HOA has a visual harmony clause. We try to ensure dock structures are uniform. So it doesn't disrupt the aesthetic continuity of the shoreline." "Phil," Derrick said, walking toward him. "Let me make something real clear. I am not part of your HOA. I don't fall under your authority. And unless you're here on behalf of the county or a legal authority, this conversation is over." Phil swallowed. "Well, okay. I'll just let Linda know." "You do that." Phil scampered off faster than he'd arrived. Derrick exhaled slowly. There it was, Linda's next move. Send someone else. Approach from a new angle. Bureaucracy as a weapon. But Derrick had learned long ago, when people try to shame you out of your place, your greatest act of resistance is staying put. That evening, he sat on the dock, finished bench beneath him, the gold badge tucked back in the drawer where it belonged. He didn't need to flash it every time. Just once was enough. The message had been delivered. He wasn't going anywhere. By the end of the month, things got quieter, not peaceful, but quieter in the way a storm recedes without ever truly leaving. The patrols stopped. The golf cart with the clipboard vanished from its usual loop. The curtain in Linda Hargrove's window didn't twitch as often. There were no more letters. No more visits from HOA foot soldiers with laminated folders. Linda had gone dark. But Derrick knew silence didn't always mean surrender. It meant retreat. A reset. She hadn't apologized. Not once. And he didn't expect her to. But the game had changed. Word had spread. The story leaked through the community like spilled bleach, harsh and impossible to ignore. Not just that the new guy across the lake wasn't some squatter or a renter, but that he was a federal marshal who had stood his ground when the Queen of Silver Pines called in a false report. Some neighbors, mostly the older couples with American flags and golden retrievers, just kept their distance. No more small talk when walking past his property. No more neighborly waves. Others, quietly, found ways to signal respect without saying a word. A man from 3 doors down left a 6-pack of local craft beer on Derrick's porch with a note. "You handled it better than I would have." A young couple, mixed race with 2 kids, waved enthusiastically from across the cove one morning. "Nice bench," the husband called out. Derrick didn't need their validation, but he appreciated their humanity. The official fallout came a few weeks later. A letter, not from the HOA, but from the county clerk's office, arrived in his mailbox. Standard legal language, but the message was clear. Derrick's lawyer had filed a formal cease and desist regarding HOA harassment. The county reviewed the jurisdictional boundaries and issued a confirming statement. His property was not, and never had been, under Silver Pine's oversight. The HOA had overstepped, and Linda had been named twice. It wouldn't make headlines, but in places like Silver Pine's, reputation was power and Linda's was cracking. That same week, rumors trickled out. Linda Hargrove was stepping down as HOA president, citing health reasons, stress, and a need to focus on family. There was no public statement, no farewell note, just a blank spot in the newsletter and a mention that the board would be transitioning leadership, effective immediately. Derrick wasn't surprised. You don't try to police someone's existence, get exposed, and walk away without losing a little shine. He spent that weekend on the lake. Saturday morning, thermos of coffee in one hand, fishing pole in the other. The bench he'd built was holding up great. Smooth cedar, sealed and stained. It had just enough give to lean back and watch the clouds break over the pine line. From this spot, the lake felt entirely his. Not because he owned it, but because he'd earned it. Linda had wanted him to disappear.
To bend.
To apologize for existing where she didn't think he belonged. But instead of folding, Derrick had shown her what real authority looked like. Measured, disciplined, unmoved by fear. He hadn't raised his voice. Hadn't made threats. He hadn't needed to. He just showed up.
And stayed.
In the weeks that followed, a subtle shift settled over the shoreline. Kids started paddling their kayaks past his dock again. A man from the HOA side even asked him where he'd bought his dock lights. Clean setup, he said, almost sheepish. A few brave souls tried to test the waters. One woman asked if Derrick would consider joining the Silver Pines advisory group, a way to, in her words, bring new voices to the table. He smiled and declined. Not out of spite, out of wisdom. You can't fix a foundation with a fresh coat of paint. One day, he saw Linda again. Not at his property, but driving her golf cart along the main road, now a few blocks from his dock.
She didn't stop.
Didn't glare. Just passed by. Her hair was flatter, makeup thinner. The clipboard was gone. She looked like someone who had learned that not every door will open for you, and some won't even budge. Derrick didn't wave. He just stood there, calm and grounded. He had nothing to prove. On the last warm weekend before fall, Derrick's sister visited from Denver. She brought her teenage son, who stood at the edge of the dock with wide eyes. "You really live here?" the kid asked. "Sure do," Derrick said. His nephew looked around at the still lake, the houses across the water, the dock he built with his own hands. "Looks like a rich people place." Derrick chuckled. "It's a place for people who don't give up what's theirs."
They fished for hours that day. Caught almost nothing.
Didn't matter. The silence was no longer heavy. Just quiet. Peaceful. As the sun dipped below the trees and the lake caught fire with golden light, Derrick leaned back on the bench, hands behind his head. No HOA letters. No patrols. No one watching. Just water. Wind. And the soft creak of cedar beneath him. Some victories didn't come with parades or headlines. Some looked like ownership, not just of property but of presence. Derrick smiled. He wasn't going anywhere.
Not now.
Not ever.